Hello everybody, it's Primalism, and I wanted to make a video today answering some of your guys' questions and just going over some of the things in the comments section that I find interesting here. The first one is make a video on how to buy healthy raw meat. So I will definitely address that here. Now, I think it, for the most part, goes without saying for a lot of people, like what the healthy animals look like. Like, what is a healthy animal? We all know it's going to be an animal that's eating its natural diet, which in most cases is just going to be grass and what it naturally forages. It's going to be an animal that hasn't had any antibiotics or any jabs, that has just lived a really natural lifestyle in the sunshine, being outdoors, surrounded by nature. We all know what the healthiest animal is. However, that's not what the question really was. It's just kind of how to buy healthy raw meat, which by that I'm assuming you mean how to buy meat that is not going to make you sick and keep you healthy and energized and not end you, basically. So I have never eaten raw meat that I would say has made me unhealthy. Now, there are things that you're going to want to avoid. That's going to be like conventional pork, conventional chicken, probably even conventional beef, I would say, for the most part. And by conventional, I mean animals that were in feedlots. Here in America, we have the most disgusting, repulsive, low quality of life feedlots for animals, probably in the entire world. Like, these animals are literally living in their own feces and eating the most garbage waste product food that you could imagine. So 100%, I think we should be avoiding the conventionally raised animals. The healthy meat, in my opinion, is going to be fresh or previously frozen, grass-fed beef, or pasture-raised chicken, hopefully corn and soy-free. The list really does go on and on, but the more natural the animal lived, the better it's going to be, the healthier it's going to be for you. So when I, for instance, am looking for healthy meat to buy, it's honestly really easy because I just order most of my meat from online. What are my requirements? I want something to be grass-fed, grass-finished, hopefully no antibiotics and hopefully no jabs. Now, the antibiotics and jabs, you can really go into depth and find out if the animals had any of that stuff. Yeah, it's not going to be just advertised for the most part. You kind of have to do some digging to find that out. So that is how you buy healthy raw meat. Any more questions about? I feel like it's a pretty self-explanatory kind of thing. Healthy raw meat. What is it? I know that sounds probably really scary to some people now that I think about it. And I'm really trying to relate to just the average person who doesn't eat a whole lot of meat, or maybe who doesn't eat a whole lot of raw meat. The healthiest meats, again, it's going to be the natural animals, the animals living naturally for the most part. And then he kind of elaborates here exactly like what that is going to entail, his question. He kind of elaborates and says, like, how do you know meat is safe to eat? I feel like all raw meat is safe to eat, except for, I would definitely pass on the conventional raised animals, again, because of all of the different toxins that they could have been exposed to. What is going to be the most affordable? Again, you get what you pay for. If you want to pay $1 a pound for conventional paper white chicken, like the chicken that has no color to it, you can get that, most affordable. However, I think that the most affordable food that you actually want to buy, I would say from what I have seen, that's going to be grass-fed ground beef from the grocery store. That's going to be pasture-raised eggs from a family farm. Those are generally going to be a lot cheaper than buying them from the store. Also, raw dairy can be pretty affordable too. It really just depends on where you are. Like, what do you have access to? Don't be afraid to be a little creative with what you eat in your sources. Like, there were times where I was just living in my really small town where I'm from, and my only source of fat was this pork back fat from this local farm. It's not something that I've ever really heard of too many people talk about eating, but it did the trick, and it satisfied my fat requirements. This is really hard because I feel like I could definitely go more in depth about these topics, and maybe there's a lot more that I should say, but I also don't want to just like exhaust you with a really long response here. The next part of the question is, where should you buy it? I think that you're going to be okay buying meat from most grocery stores, and also ordering it online. Online, they're a little bit more transparent with the practices of the farm and the animals, for instance. Another question here from Hey Broski 2853: is grass-fed, grass-finished meat always guaranteed to not be from a sick animal and not have toxins, parasites, or bacteria? So let's start with the toxins part. Like, no, you can't guarantee that just because it's grass fed and grass finished. If you buy grass fed, grass finished meat from the grocery store, a lot of the times it will have been jabbed. It may have antibiotics. Now, some meat may be saying that there are no antibiotics, so in that case, that's great. Um, a lot of the fat, or a lot of these toxins that the animals get, they are stored in the fat and organs. So if you're buying meat from the grocery store, it's safe to only buy muscle meat. Let's talk about the parasites part of the question. The parasites thing is one of the biggest myths ever. It is to keep us afraid from eating raw meat. Like, what more scary of an image could you put into somebody's head than, if you eat this food, you will have worms crawling throughout your body, they'll take control of your brain, and then eventually, after suffering a horrible disease, you will die. Like that, obviously that's going to stop people from eating raw meat. And if that stops you, then don't do it. Like if stuff like that stops you from doing something, don't do it. Now, I've always been somebody who looks into things a little bit deeper. I want to try things out for myself. I've never had any problems with parasites. I've never had any time where I believed that I had a parasite or thought there was any symptoms of parasites. I would not be afraid of parasites, but this is not medical advice. You cannot, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you my opinion, and, do with it what you will. Now, the bacteria part, bacteria is great for us. We need bacteria. Salmonella, E. coli, all the various bacterias that are going to be in raw meat and raw dairy and raw eggs and raw fruits and raw vegetables. Those things are all good for us. We want bacteria. We do not want to be these sterile creatures with no bacteria. That's what causes disease, in my opinion, not having bacteria. Another person here is asking me, what could make meat toxic? Well, if you've seen any video from like the American feedlots here and the way that these animals are fed and treated, you know exactly what makes animals toxic. It's introducing unnatural things into those animals' lifestyles, like the corn, the soy, but even worse than that is like feeding animals waste products from other like manufacturing plants, or like feeding them like Skittles waste, feeding them all kinds of nasty stuff, and then loading them up with antibiotics, cramming them all together where they're, basically suffocating in fumes of their own feces and just not living healthy lives in the sunlight. That's what is going to make animals toxic. So another thing that you said here was to tell people to only eat a little bit if they're trying out a new source. Definitely. Like when you're just starting out, like even when I order like a new piece of meat online, I want to taste it, test it out before I'll just maybe get a pound of it, but don't go like too crazy on it. You don't want to buy a bunch of meat that ends up being disgusting, or like you buy a bunch of liver from this one source and it all ends up being oxidized and brown and just not tasty. And you mentioned something about affordability here, like not buying steaks or getting hard or ground meat instead. So yes, you definitely want to stay away from the steaks if you're trying to do this as affordably as possible. There's other cuts of muscle meat that are going to be cheaper, like some of the more undesirable things. Like you're not going to want to do ribeye and like strip steaks for the most part. Doing like chuck steak is a really good option because it's really fatty and it's not quite as expensive as the other cuts. Doing like more leaner cuts, like I've seen stuff like skirt steaks, or you could do like top round, just more lean cuts of beef are going to be great. One thing to note is that the organ meats are going to be very affordable. There's a magical organ that tastes very similar to muscle meat except better in like every way, and that would just be raw heart. So if you are wanting a really affordable meat, but you're not wanting to necessarily do the ground beef, which is one of the most affordable meats, you could do heart. Heart tastes incredible. It's more nutritious than muscle meat, and it's also very affordable too. That's another great thing about organs in general is that organs are not very expensive. Fat from the right sources is also not very expensive. Like right now, I'm getting raw beef fat for like $4.50 a pound. And organs, they're just not that expensive either. Right now I'm paying about $10 a pound for them. If you find a local source, they might be even cheaper than that. However, I've seen them get really expensive, so it just depends on where you're going. Like, I've been doing this for too long. I've seen too many people's experiences. It's what I'm saying here can really vary. What's affordable in your area could be totally different than what's affordable in somebody else's area. Somebody else might be paying $20, $30 a pound for raw liver. Somebody else is paying like $2 to $3 a pound. Or somebody might be paying, $20 a pound for raw butter. Or this guy, he goes to Whole Foods and gets raw beef fat for free because they're just throwing it away. So there's a whole bunch of things to do. That's another tip that I'll include in here. It's that sometimes if you have like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts near you and you're wanting to get like raw fat, you can ask them to save the fat. Call them up and say, hey, would you guys be able to save me some raw fat that's been trimmed off of the grass-fed steaks? In some cases, they'll say yes. And that stuff is great. I hope that answers your questions and gives you some ideas of like how to buy meat, like what's going to be most affordable, things like that. Again, it really does depend on where you are. You're going to have to do some scouting. You're going to have to do some research and exploration and experimentation to find out what's going to be the best where you are. But this is definitely going to, I hope, help you get a good start. Apologize if some of it does just kind of seem like common sense. But yeah, some people might not be aware of some of this stuff. These are just my recommendations. But if you guys had any other questions about similar topics or anything related to raw meats, or you guys want to know my opinion about something, just feel free to leave a comment. And you guys have a great rest of your day.